David stared at the email on his computer screen for the 10th time that morning. The annual company family picnic was just 3 days away, and once again, he would be showing up alone. At 34, he was the youngest CEO his tech company had ever had, and the board members never let him forget it. Still not ready for the real responsibilities of leadership, he had overheard board member Peterson whisper to his wife at last year's event, "A man his age should be settled down by now. How can we trust him to run a company when he can't even maintain a stable personal life?" Those words still stung. David had worked 16-hour days for the past 5 years to prove himself worthy of the position. He had increased company profits by 40%, launched 3 successful products, and earned the respect of his employees. But somehow being single made all of that meaningless in the eyes of the old-fashioned board. The truth was, David barely had time to sleep, let alone date. Ever since his ex-wife Jennifer had walked out 2 years ago, leaving behind their 7-year-old daughter Sophie without even a goodbye note, his world had revolved around 2 things: his company and his little girl. Jennifer had decided that being a mother was too restricting for her artistic career and had moved to Paris to find herself. David had been heartbroken, but Sophie had been devastated. "Daddy, why did Mommy leave us?" Sophie had asked him countless times in those first few months. Was it because I was bad? David had spent many sleepless nights holding his crying daughter, assuring her that Mommy's leaving had nothing to do with her. He had taken her to therapy, changed his work schedule to be home for dinner every night, and learned to braid hair through YouTube videos. Slowly, Sophie had started smiling again, but David knew she still carried the fear that everyone she loved would eventually leave her. His assistant, Mrs. Chen, knocked on his office door and entered with her usual efficiency. She had been with the company for 15 years and treated David like the son she never had. "Still worried about the picnic?" she asked, noticing the email still open on his screen. David sighed and leaned back in his chair. Peterson made another comment yesterday about how unstable young executives can be. "I swear, Mrs. Chen, sometimes I think they're looking for any reason to question my leadership." Mrs. Chen sat down across from his desk, something she only did when she had something important to say. "David, you know I've watched you grow from an intern to the CEO of this company. You're brilliant, dedicated, and you've proven yourself 100 times over, but maybe it wouldn't hurt to show them that you have a balanced personal life too. I know dating hasn't been a priority, and I understand why. Sophie comes first, as she should, but perception matters in business, especially with traditional board members like Peterson." David rubbed his temples. "I don't have time to date, Mrs. Cheney. Between running the company and being a single dad, I barely have time to breathe. And even if I did meet someone, how do I explain that I come with a 7-year-old who has abandonment issues? Most women my age run when they hear single father." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "What if I told you there was a solution just for the picnic, just to get Peterson and the others off your back?" "What kind of solution?" Mrs. Chen showed him a website on her phone. "My friend's daughter used a service like this when she needed a date for her law firm's gala. It's completely professional. You hire someone to accompany you to events. Nothing inappropriate. Just someone who can play the role of a supportive girlfriend for a few hours." David stared at the screen. "You want me to hire a fake girlfriend?" "I want you to hire someone who can help you show the board that you're a well-rounded person with a stable personal life. Look, David, I know it sounds crazy, but you need this promotion to senior partner that's coming up next month. Peterson has been pushing for his nephew to get it instead. This could tip the scales in your favor." David had to admit the idea had merit, even if it made him uncomfortable. "But what about Sophie? She's coming to the picnic. I can't lie to my daughter." "You don't have to lie. You can introduce this person as a friend. Sophie is smart, but she's also 7. She won't question it if you keep things simple." That afternoon, David found himself on the phone with the agency Mrs. Chen had recommended. The woman on the other end of the line, Ms. Rodriguez, sounded professional and discreet. "We provide companionship services for business events, social gatherings, and family functions," she explained. "Our companions are educated, well-mannered, and skilled at adapting to any social situation." What type of event are you attending? It's my company's annual family picnic, David said, feeling foolish. I need someone who can convince people that I'm in a stable relationship. My daughter will be there too, so it needs to be someone who's comfortable around children. I have just the person in mind. Her name is Grace, and she's actually working on her graduate degree in child psychology. She's excellent with kids and has experience with corporate events. She's available this Saturday. David felt a knot in his stomach. Was he really doing this? What does she need to know about me? About my situation? Just the basics. Your profession, your daughter's name and age, how long you've supposedly been dating. We recommend keeping the backstory simple. Maybe you met through mutual friends a few months ago and have been taking things slow because of your daughter. After hanging up, David sat in his office staring out the window. His employees were starting to leave for the day, heading home to their families. Soon he would drive to Sophie's school to pick her up, help her with homework, make dinner, and read her a bedtime story. It was a routine he treasured, but it was also exhausting. He thought about Jennifer, how she had complained that he worked too much, that he didn't pay enough attention to her. Maybe if he had been different, if he had tried harder to balance everything, she wouldn't have left. But then again, what kind of mother abandons her child? His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie's teacher. Sophie drew a beautiful picture of your family today. She included a space for Daddy's friend and said she hopes you find someone nice soon. Thought you'd want to know she's been talking about wanting a mommy figure lately. David's heart clenched. Sophie never directly asked for a mother, but he had noticed her paying extra attention to her friends' moms at school pickup. She would watch how they hugged their children, how they chatted with other parents, how they seemed to belong to a world that she and David were only visiting. Maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Maybe this wasn't just about the board or his career. Maybe Sophie needed to see that her father could have relationships, that not everyone who entered their lives would leave, even if it was just pretend, even if it was just for one afternoon. He picked up his phone and called the agency back. Ms. Rodriguez, this is David Thompson. I'd like to confirm the arrangement for Saturday. Grace sounds perfect. Wonderful. She'll meet you at the park entrance at 11 a.m. She'll be wearing a blue sundress and carrying a small white purse. You'll recognize her from the photo I'm sending to your email now. After ending the call, David opened the email and looked at Grace's picture. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. According to her brief profile, she was 28, working on her master's degree, and had experience with children through her research and volunteer work. David closed his laptop and headed out to pick up Sophie. As he drove through the city traffic, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. In 3 days, he would introduce his daughter to a complete stranger and pretend they were dating. It felt wrong on every level, but what choice did he have? He thought about Peterson's dismissive comments, about the upcoming promotion, about Sophie's innocent wish for a mother figure. Sometimes being an adult meant making difficult choices that didn't feel entirely right but served a greater purpose. When he arrived at Sophie's school, she ran to him with her usual enthusiasm, her backpack bouncing as she skipped toward the car. "Daddy, guess what happened today?" she said as she climbed into her booster seat. "Tell me everything, princess." As Sophie chattered about her day, David made a silent promise to himself. Whatever happened at the picnic, whatever this arrangement led to, he would make sure his daughter never got hurt. She had already lost one parent. He wouldn't let her lose another, even if that other person was never really theirs to begin with. The next 3 days would change everything, though David had no way of knowing that as he drove home with his daughter, both of them unaware that their small family was about to grow in ways neither of them could have imagined. Saturday morning arrived faster than David had expected. He stood in front of his bedroom mirror adjusting his polo shirt for the 3rd time. Sophie was in her room, carefully choosing which stuffed animal to bring to the company picnic. "Daddy, should I bring Mr. Whiskers or Princess Sparkle?" she called from down the hall. "Whichever one you think would like to meet new people," David replied, his voice slightly shaky. His hands were sweating, and he couldn't remember the last time he had felt this nervous. Even his first board meeting as CEO hadn't made his stomach twist like this. He had barely slept the night before, going over possible conversations in his head. What if Grace didn't show up? What if she did show up but they had no chemistry? What if Sophie didn't like her? Worse yet, what if Sophie liked her too much? Sophie appeared in his doorway holding both stuffed animals. I decided to bring both, that way if your friend likes animals, she can meet them too. David's heart skipped. My friend? The lady you're bringing to the picnic? Mrs. Chen told me yesterday when she dropped off your dry cleaning that you invited someone special. Sophie's eyes lit up with excitement. Is she pretty, Daddy? Is she nice? Does she like kids? David knelt down to Sophie's level, trying to find the right words. She seems very nice, sweetheart, but remember, she's just a friend, okay? Don't get too excited. But Sophie was already excited, bouncing on her toes. I can't wait to meet her. I drew her a picture yesterday just in case. She ran back to her room and returned with a colorful drawing of stick figures under a rainbow. That's you? That's me, and that's her. I made her tall like you, but with long hair like the princess in my favorite movie. David took the drawing, feeling a pang of guilt. It's beautiful, princess. But remember what I said about not getting too excited, okay? 20 minutes later, they were driving toward the park where the company picnic was being held. Sophie chattered nonstop about all the games she wanted to play and all the people she wanted to introduce to Daddy's friend. Will she sit with us during lunch? Can she push me on the swings? Do you think she'll want to see my cartwheel? I've been practicing all week. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. Sophie, sweetie, we need to be polite and not overwhelm her, okay? She might want to talk to the other adults too. As they pulled into the park's parking lot, David spotted her immediately. Grace was standing near the entrance wearing a blue sundress just as promised, with a small white purse over her shoulder. She looked even prettier than her photo, but what struck David most was how comfortable she looked. While he was a bundle of nerves, she appeared calm and confident. Is that her? Sophie whispered loudly, pressing her face against the car window. Yes, that's her. She's really pretty, Daddy. And she's smiling. I like her already. David took a deep breath, got out of the car, and helped Sophie with her seatbelt. Together, they walked toward Grace, Sophie practically skipping with excitement. David. Grace approached them with a warm smile. I'm Grace. It's so nice to finally meet you. Thank you for coming, David said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm but gentle, and her eyes were kind. This is Sophie. Sophie stepped forward, boldly, holding up her drawing. Hi, I'm Sophie, and I made this for you. Do you like it? Grace knelt down to Sophie's level, accepting the drawing with genuine enthusiasm. Sophie, this is absolutely beautiful. Is this your family? Yes, that's Daddy, that's me, and that's you. I gave you a yellow dress because yellow is a happy color, and Daddy said you make him happy. David's cheeks burned red. Sophie, I never said that. But Grace laughed softly. Well, I hope I can make both of you happy today. Thank you for including me in your beautiful picture, Sophie. Can I keep it? Sophie nodded eagerly. Yes. And these are my friends, Mr. Whiskers and Princess Sparkle. They wanted to meet you too. Grace examined each stuffed animal seriously, shaking their tiny paws. It's an honor to meet such distinguished stuffed animals. Mr. Whiskers, you have excellent whiskers, and Princess Sparkle, your tiara is magnificent. Sophie giggled with delight. David watched in amazement as Grace continued to engage with his daughter, as if she were the most important person in the world. There was nothing fake or forced about her interest. She genuinely seemed to enjoy talking with Sophie. Should we head to the picnic? David suggested. As they walked toward the main area, Sophie skipped between them, holding both their hands. Grace, do you like games? We're going to play sack races and have a water balloon toss. Daddy always gets really wet during the water balloon toss because he's not very good at catching. Hey now, David protested with mock indignation. I'm not that bad. Grace grinned. Well, I guess I'll have to help protect you from getting soaked then. The picnic area was already buzzing with activity. Families were spread across the grass, children were running around playing games, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. David immediately spotted several board members and their families near the food tables. "There's Peterson," he murmured, to Grace. She squeezed his arm gently. "Relax. We've got this." David was surprised by how reassuring her touch felt. For a moment, he almost forgot this was all an act. "David," Peterson's booming voice carried across the lawn. "There you are. And who might this lovely lady be?" Sophie ran ahead of them. "Mr. Peterson, this is Grace. She's Daddy's friend and she likes my stuffed animals and she thinks my picture is beautiful." Peterson chuckled. "Well, any friend of Sophie's is a friend of ours. Grace, was it? How long have you and David been acquainted?" Grace slipped naturally into her role. "We met through mutual friends a few months ago. David mentioned he had a daughter, and I have to say, he didn't exaggerate when he said she was special." "What do you do for work, Grace?" Peterson's wife joined the conversation, sizing Grace up with obvious curiosity. "I'm finishing my master's degree in child psychology," Grace replied easily. "I also volunteer at a children's center downtown. I love working with kids." David watched as Peterson and his wife exchanged approving glances. A woman with a graduate degree who worked with children? This was exactly the type of person they thought he should be dating. "That's wonderful," Peterson said. "David, you didn't mention you were seeing someone. This is quite a pleasant surprise." Before David could respond, Sophie tugged on Grace's dress. "Grace, can you come see the playground? I want to show you how high I can swing." "Of course, sweetheart." Grace looked at David. "Would you like to come with us?" They spent the next hour at the playground with Sophie showing off every piece of equipment. Grace cheered for Sophie's cartwheel attempts, pushed her on the swings, and helped her across the monkey bars. David found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in months as he watched Grace and Sophie together. Other employees and their families began to gravitate toward them. Grace had a natural way with everyone she met. She complimented other children's drawings, helped settle a small dispute between two kids over a toy, and made conversation with the other parents as if she had known them for years. "Your girlfriend is amazing with kids," said Jennifer from accounting, whose 5-year-old son had attached himself to Grace's side. "She should be a teacher." David felt a strange flutter in his chest when Jennifer called Grace his girlfriend. "She's pretty great," he found himself saying, meaning it more than he expected. During lunch, Sophie insisted that Grace sit between her and David. She peppered Grace with questions about her favorite foods, her favorite colors, and whether she liked fairy tales. "I love fairy tales," Grace said. "What's your favorite one?" "Cinderella, because she gets a family in the end. But I don't like the part where the stepsisters are mean to her." Sophie's voice grew serious. "Sometimes kids at school are mean. To me because I don't have a mommy." David tensed, but Grace handled it perfectly. "You know what I think, Sophie? I think families come in all different shapes and sizes. Some kids have a mommy and a daddy. Some have just a mommy or just a daddy. Some live with their grandparents or their aunts and uncles. What matters isn't how many people are in your family, but how much love there is. And I can tell there's a lot of love between you and your daddy." Sophie smiled brightly. "Yeah, Daddy gives the best hugs, and he makes funny voices when he reads bedtime stories." Grace looked at David with genuine warmth. "He sounds like an amazing daddy." As the afternoon continued, David found himself forgetting that Grace was being paid to be there. She fit so naturally into their dynamic, laughing at his jokes, encouraging Sophie's silly dances, and somehow making him feel like the most interesting person at the picnic when they talked. During the sack race, Grace cheered loudly for both David and Sophie, even when David tripped and fell flat on his face. She helped him up, brushing grass off his shirt while laughing. "My hero," she teased, and for a moment David felt like maybe he could be someone's hero after all. The water balloon toss was exactly as Sophie had predicted. David got completely soaked, but this time Grace was there to hand him a towel and share in the laughter. Sophie was delighted that her prediction had come true. As the picnic began to wind down, Peterson approached them one more time. "David, I have to say, you seem different today, more relaxed, happier." David glanced at Grace, who was helping Sophie collect her stuffed animals. "I guess I am. Well, whatever you're doing." David thought the arrangement with Grace was over after the picnic. He had paid her for the day. thanked her for making it so successful, and figured that was the end of it. But life had other plans. 3 days later, David was sitting in his office when his business partner Michael burst through the door with his usual energy. Michael owned 30% of the company and had been David's closest friend since college. He was also the type of person who made decisions first and thought about them later. "David, you're going to love this," Michael announced, practically bouncing on his heels. "I just got off the phone with the investors from Tokyo. They're flying in tomorrow night, and I've arranged a dinner party at the country club. This could be the deal that takes our company international." David looked up from his computer. "Tomorrow night? Michael, you can't just spring a dinner party on people with 1 day's notice." "I can, and I did. My wife is already calling the caterers. Look, these investors are old-fashioned Japanese businessmen. They want to see that we're stable, successful family men. They need to trust us before they'll invest their money." Michael paused, studying David's face. "You're bringing Grace, right?" David's stomach dropped. "Grace? Your girlfriend from the picnic? Peterson hasn't stopped talking about her. He said she was charming, educated, and perfect for you. The investors need to see that you're settled down, David. A single CEO might seem unreliable to them. Michael, I can't just call her up and ask her to come to a dinner party. We're not actually dating." Michael stared at him. "What do you mean you're not actually dating? You brought her to the company picnic. Sophie seemed to adore her. I assumed things were getting serious." David realized he had never told Michael the truth about Grace. His friend had been traveling for business during the picnic and had only heard about it from other people. "It's complicated." "Well, uncomplicate it. Call her, ask her to come. These investors could bring in $50 million, David. $50 million. That's enough to expand to 3 new cities and hire 200 more people." After Michael left, David sat staring at his phone for an hour. He had Grace's number from the agency, but calling her felt wrong somehow. Their day at the picnic had felt so natural, so real. Asking her to pretend again seemed like it would cheapen what they had shared. But $50 million was a lot of money. And it wasn't just about him anymore. His employees depended on this company for their livelihoods. Their families depended on it too. Finally, he dialed the number. "Hello?" Grace's voice sounded tired. "Grace, this is David. David Thompson, from the picnic last Saturday." "Oh, hi, David." Her voice immediately became warmer. "How are you? How's Sophie?" "We're good. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you, actually. She's drawn 3 more pictures with you in them." David paused. "Listen, I have a strange request. I know our arrangement was just for the 1 day, but something's come up." Grace was quiet for a moment. "What kind of something?" David explained. "About the investors, about the dinner party, about how much this deal could mean for the company. I know it's short notice, and I know this wasn't part of our original agreement. I'd pay you double what you made for the picnic." "David, Grace hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" Another pause. "Because Saturday felt different, real, and I don't want to confuse Sophie. She's already talking about me like I'm going to be around permanently. What happens when these pretend dates end? She's going to be hurt." David felt a knot form in his stomach. "You think she's getting too attached?" "I think we all are." Those 4 words hung in the air between them. David didn't know how to respond, because Grace was right. He had found himself thinking about her constantly since Saturday. The way she had laughed at his jokes. The way she had treated Sophie like she was the most important person in the world. The way she had made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could have a life outside of work and parenting duties. "Grace, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Did any part of Saturday feel real to you? Or was it all just professional?" Grace was quiet for so long that David thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was softer than before. "It felt real, David. More real than anything I've experienced in a long time. And that's exactly why I shouldn't come to this dinner party. But what if I don't want it to be professional anymore?" The words came out before David could stop them. He hadn't meant to say that. He hadn't even realized he was thinking it until the words left his mouth. "What are you saying?" David took a deep breath. "I'm saying that maybe we could try this for real. Maybe Saturday doesn't have to be the end of something. Maybe it could be the beginning. David, you hired me. You don't actually know me. You don't know anything about my real life, my real problems, my real dreams. You know the version of me that I created for your company picnic. Then tell me about the real you." And she did. For the next 2 hours, they stayed on the phone while David sat in his empty office and Grace told him about her real life. She was 28, working on her master's degree in child psychology. She had grown up in foster care and had aged out of the system at 18 with nowhere to go and no family to support her. She had worked 3 jobs to put herself through college, sleeping in her car some nights when she couldn't afford rent. The escort work was something she had started recently, and she hated every minute of it, but it was the only way she could afford to pay for her graduate program. Her dream was to open a center for children in foster care, to give them the support and stability she had never had. She wanted to help kids who felt alone and unwanted, the way she had felt for most of her childhood. "The thing is," Grace said, "I've learned not to get my hopes up about people. Everyone leaves eventually. Foster families, social workers, boyfriends. Everyone finds a reason to move on. So when I met you and Sophie on Saturday and it felt so much like the family I've always wanted, it scared me." David felt his heart breaking for her. "Grace, I'm not going anywhere. Sophie and I were not going anywhere." "How can you promise that? You barely know me." "Because I know enough. I know you're kind. I know you're smart. I know you made my daughter laugh in a way I haven't seen since her mother left. I know you made me feel like maybe I don't have to do everything alone anymore." Grace was crying now. David could hear it in her voice. "This is crazy, David. We don't know if we're actually compatible. We don't know if this could really work." "Then let's find out. Come to the dinner party tomorrow night. Not as someone I hired, but as someone I'm genuinely interested in getting to know better. We'll see how it goes. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people seeing if there's something worth exploring." The next evening, David stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 4th time. Sophie was spending the night at her friend's house, which was probably for the best. This dinner was going to be stressful enough without worrying about her too. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Running a few minutes late. The restaurant is fancier than anything I'm used to. I'm nervous." David quickly typed back, "You're going to be perfect. I'm nervous too." The country club was exactly the type of place where David felt like he was pretending to belong. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and servers who moved like dancers. Michael and his wife Linda had already arrived with the 3 Japanese investors. David spotted Grace the moment she walked in. She was wearing a simple black dress and looked absolutely beautiful, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes as she looked around the elegant dining room. He walked over to her immediately. "You made it." "I almost turned around twice in the parking lot," she admitted. "David, I don't belong in a place like this." "Neither do I, most of the time. But tonight, we belong here together." The dinner started well enough. Grace charmed the investors with her genuine interest in their culture and her thoughtful questions about their business philosophies. Her background in psychology made her an excellent conversationalist, and David found himself genuinely proud to introduce her as his girlfriend. But as the evening progressed, David began to notice things that made him uncomfortable. The way the investors' wives looked Grace up and down, clearly trying to figure out if she came from money. The way they asked subtle questions about her family background and education. "So, Grace," said Mrs. Tanaka, the eldest investor's wife, "what do your parents do?" David saw Grace tense slightly. "I was raised in foster care, actually. I don't have parents in the traditional sense." The table went quiet for a moment. David could feel the shift in atmosphere, the way the other couples exchanged glances. "That must have been difficult," Mrs. Tanaka said carefully. "It was, but it also taught me to be independent and to work hard for everything I have. I think it made me stronger." David reached over and took Grace's hand under the table. She squeezed back, but he could feel her trembling slightly. Mr. Yamamoto, the lead investor, leaned forward. David, your company has impressive growth potential, but in Japan we believe that a man's personal stability reflects his professional reliability. A strong family foundation is very important to us. David felt Grace's hand tighten in his. He knew what Mr. Yamamoto was really saying. A woman from foster care. 2 weeks had passed since the dinner party and David hadn't heard from Grace. He had sent her a few text messages, but her replies were short and polite. It was clear she was keeping her distance, and it was driving him crazy. The worst part was explaining to Sophie why Grace wasn't around anymore. His 7-year-old daughter had been asking about her every single day. "When is Grace coming over for dinner, Daddy?" Sophie asked as they sat at their kitchen table eating takeout Chinese food. "You promised she could see my room." "I never promised that, sweetheart," David said gently. "Remember what I told you? Grace is very busy with her schoolwork." Sophie pushed her fried rice around her plate. "But she likes us, right? She said my picture was beautiful. She played with me on the swings. People don't do that if they don't like you." David's heart ached. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes adults made things complicated, even when they cared about each other? "Yes, Princess. She likes us. Sometimes grown-ups have to figure out difficult things, and it takes time. Like how long it took you to figure out how to braid my hair?" David smiled despite his frustration. Something like that. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, David found himself looking at Grace's number on his phone. He had started to call her at least 10 times over the past 2 weeks, but had stopped himself each time. What would he say? How could he convince her to give them a real chance when she was so afraid of getting hurt? His phone suddenly rang, making him jump. It was his assistant, Mrs. Chen, which was unusual for this time of night. "David, I'm sorry to call so late, but we have a problem," she said. "Sophie's school just called me because they couldn't reach you. There's been an incident." David's blood ran cold. "What kind of incident? Is she hurt?" "She's not hurt physically, but the school counselor wants to meet with you first thing tomorrow morning. Apparently, Sophie told her teacher today that her new mommy might not want to live with them anymore, and she's been crying on and off all afternoon." David closed his eyes. He had been so focused on his own feelings about Grace that he hadn't realized how much Sophie was struggling with her absence. Did she say anything else? The counselor mentioned that Sophie has been talking about Grace for weeks, calling her Daddy's girlfriend who might become my new mommy. "David, I think Sophie is more attached than you realized." After hanging up, David sat in his dark living room feeling like the worst father in the world. He had brought Grace into Sophie's life without thinking about the consequences. Now his daughter was experiencing another form of abandonment, and it was entirely his fault. The next morning, David sat across from Sophie's school counselor, Mrs. Williams, feeling like he was being called to the principal's office himself. "Mr. Thompson, I want to start by saying that Sophie is a wonderful child. She's bright, creative, and generally well-adjusted. But yesterday she became very upset during circle time when the other children were talking about their families." Mrs. Williams pulled out a folder. "Sophie drew this picture during art therapy yesterday. She showed him a drawing of 3 stick figures, but the third figure had been scribbled over with black crayon until it was barely visible. She told me that was her maybe mommy, but that she had to erase her because maybe mommies don't stay." Mrs. Williams continued. "David, has there been a woman in Sophie's life recently who is no longer around?" David felt like he couldn't breathe. "Yes, there has been someone, but it's complicated." "I'm sure it is. Adult relationships always are. But Sophie is processing this as another abandonment. She's already lost her biological mother. Now she feels like she's losing another mother figure." Mrs. Williams leaned forward. "I need to ask you directly. Is this woman someone who could potentially be a permanent part of Sophie's life? Because if not, I strongly recommend that you don't introduce her to Sophie again. Another loss right now could be very damaging to her emotional development." "What if I'm not sure?" David asked quietly. "Then you need to figure it out quickly. Sophie can't handle this uncertainty much longer." That afternoon, David made a decision that scared him more than any business deal he had ever negotiated. He drove to the address Grace had given him weeks ago, determined to have an honest conversation about their future. Grace lived in a small apartment complex near the university. Her building was old but well-maintained, and David could see her, car parked outside. He sat in his own car for 10 minutes trying to figure out what he was going to say. Finally, he walked up to her door and knocked. Grace opened the door looking surprised and a little worried. "David? What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about Sophie." Grace's apartment was small but cozy. She had filled it with plants and books, and there were children's drawings pinned to her refrigerator from her volunteer work. It felt warm and lived in, nothing like the cold perfection of his own house. "Grace, I'm going to be completely honest with you," David began. "Sophie is struggling. She's been crying at school, telling people that her, maybe mommy, doesn't want to stay with them. Her school counselor says she's processing your absence as another abandonment." Grace sank onto her couch, looking stricken. "Oh God, David, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt her." "I know you didn't. But we're at a point where we have to make a decision. Either we try to make this work for real, or we have to end it completely. Sophie can't handle this uncertainty anymore." Grace was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. "David, what if we try and it doesn't work out? What if we date for a few months and then realize we're not compatible? Sophie would be even more hurt than she is now. What if we try and it does work out?" "You don't understand," Grace said, her voice breaking. "I've never had a family. I don't know how to be part of one. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough for Sophie? What if I'm not good enough for you?" David moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Grace, look at me." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "You spent one afternoon with us, and you made Sophie happier than she's been since her mother left. You talked to her like she mattered. You listened to her stories. You celebrated her cartwheels and her stuffed animals and her terrible jokes. Do you know how rare that is?" Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But that was just one. And every day since then, Sophie has asked about you. She's drawn pictures of you. She's planned things she wants to show you. She's already made room for you in her heart." "What about you?" Grace asked softly. "Have you made room for me in your heart?" David reached over and took her hands in his. "Grace, I think I've been making room for you since the moment you knelt down to look at Sophie's drawing. I think I've been falling for you since you pushed her on those swings and cheered for her cartwheel. I think I've been in love with you since you held my hand under the table at that dinner and didn't let go even when those people made you feel unwelcome." Grace stared at him. "You love me?" "Yes, I do. And I think Sophie loves you too. The question is, do you think you could love us back?" Grace was crying now, but she was also smiling. "I already do love you both. That's what terrifies me so much." "Then why are we fighting this?" Grace stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the parking lot. "Because I'm scared, David. I'm scared that this is too good to be true. I'm scared that you'll realize I don't fit in your world. I'm scared that Sophie will decide she wants a different kind of mother. I'm scared that I'll disappoint both of you." David joined her at the window. "Grace, I can't promise that it will be easy. I can't promise that we won't face challenges or that people won't judge us. But I can promise that Sophie and I won't give up on you. We won't abandon you the way other people have." Grace turned to face him. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned too. Jennifer left Sophie and me without even saying goodbye. She decided that being a mother was too hard, too limiting. But you're not Jennifer. You see children as precious gifts, not burdens. You see Sophie's questions and energy and needs as wonderful parts of who she is." David paused, choosing his words carefully. "Grace, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm not asking you to move in with us next week. I'm just asking you to give us a real chance. To go on actual dates, to spend time with Sophie without pretending, to see if what we felt at that picnic and at that dinner was real." Grace was quiet, for a long moment, thinking. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, if we try to make this real, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if it doesn't work out, you'll help me say goodbye to Sophie in a way that doesn't make her feel abandoned again. Promise me that we'll put her emotional well-being first, even if it means we can't be together. David nodded solemnly. I promise. Grace took a deep breath. Okay then, let's try. They stood there looking at each other, both scared and excited about what they were agreeing to try. Outside, the sun was setting, and David realized that this felt like the end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of another. So what happens now? Grace asked. David smiled. Now I take you on our first real date, and then, if you're ready, I'd like you to come to dinner at our house this weekend. Sophie has been practicing making spaghetti, and she's very excited to show someone her cooking skills. Grace laughed through her tears. I would love that. 3 months had passed since David and Grace decided to try for real, and their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day. But David knew that the biggest test was still coming. Tonight was his company's annual holiday party, and this time Grace would be attending as his actual girlfriend, not as someone he had hired. The irony wasn't lost on him. The first time Grace had attended a company event, she had been pretending to be his girlfriend. Now that she really was his girlfriend, he was more nervous than he had ever been during their fake dates. Daddy, does my dress look okay? Sophie asked, twirling in front of David's bedroom mirror. She was wearing a red velvet dress that Grace had helped her pick out the week before, and she looked absolutely beautiful. You look like a princess, sweetheart, David said, adjusting his tie for the third time. Are you excited to see Grace? Sophie nodded enthusiastically. I can't wait to show everyone that she's really my daddy's girlfriend now, not just pretend. David's stomach flipped. Over the past 3 months, he and Grace had been completely honest with Sophie about how they had met, explaining it in terms a 7-year-old could understand. They had told her that Daddy had asked Grace to come to the picnic as a friend, but then they had discovered they really liked each other and wanted to try being boyfriend and girlfriend for real. Sophie had accepted this explanation with the simple logic of childhood. So you were practicing being boyfriend and girlfriend and then you decided you were good at it? Something like that, princess. The doorbell rang, and Sophie ran to answer it before David could stop her. Grace stood on the doorstep looking stunning in a navy blue dress holding a small wrapped gift. Grace? Sophie threw her arms around Grace's waist. You look so pretty. Is that present for me? Grace laughed and hugged Sophie back. It's just a little something I saw that reminded me of you. She handed Sophie the gift, which turned out to be a small necklace with a heart pendant. It's beautiful, Sophie exclaimed. Can you help me put it on? As Grace fastened the necklace around Sophie's neck, David watched them together and felt his heart swell with love. Over the past 3 months, he had watched Grace and Sophie's relationship grow naturally and beautifully. Grace never tried to replace Sophie's mother or force herself into a parental role. Instead, she had become Sophie's friend, confidant, and biggest cheerleader. Ready to go show everyone how gorgeous you both look? David asked. The holiday party was being held at the same country club where they had had the disastrous dinner with the Japanese investors. David had been worried about returning to the place where Grace had felt so unwelcome, but she had insisted. She wanted to go back. I want to show them that I belong here with you, she had said. Not because of my background or my bank account, but because of who I am and how much I love you and Sophie. As they walked into the elegantly decorated ballroom, David immediately spotted several board members and their families. Peterson was standing near the bar with his wife, and David could see him notice their arrival. Here we go, Grace whispered, squeezing David's arm. Remember, David whispered back. You have nothing to prove to these people. But Grace had proven plenty over the past 3 months. She had finished her master's degree with honors and had been accepted into a doctoral program with a full scholarship. She had also been offered a job at a prestigious child psychology clinic, which she had turned down to start her own practice working with foster children. David had been amazed by her dedication and passion. She worked with kids who had been through the same experiences she had, helping them heal and find hope. Watching her with these children had only made David love her more. "David," Peterson's booming voice carried across the room. "There's our golden boy. And the lovely Grace, of course." Sophie stepped forward proudly. "Mr. Peterson, Grace is my daddy's real girlfriend now, not just his friend. And look, she gave me this necklace." Peterson chuckled. "Well, aren't you the luckiest little girl? Grace, how have you been? I heard through the grapevine that you finished your degree." "Yes, I graduated last month," Grace replied confidently. "I'm starting my own practice in January, working with children in foster care." "That's wonderful," Peterson's wife said, and David could hear genuine warmth in her voice this time. "What made you choose that particular field?" Grace glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. "I spent most of my childhood in foster care myself, so I understand what these kids are going through. I want to help them heal and build healthy relationships." David watched as Peterson and his wife exchanged a look, but this time it was one of respect rather than judgment. Over the past few months, word had gotten around the company about Grace's background and her work. Instead of seeing her as someone without proper credentials, people had begun to see her as someone who had overcome incredible challenges to build something meaningful. "That's very admirable," Peterson said sincerely. "The world needs more people willing to help children who don't have anyone else." As the evening progressed, David noticed how different this company party felt compared to previous years. Instead of standing awkwardly on the sidelines, he found himself genuinely enjoying the conversations. Grace was no longer nervous or trying to prove herself. She was simply being herself, and people were drawn to her authenticity. Sophie was having the time of her life, dancing with Grace and showing off her new necklace to anyone who would listen. At one point, David overheard her telling the daughter of another executive, "Grace used to not have a family when she was little, just like how I didn't have a mommy. But now we're all together, and it's the best family ever." Later in the evening, Michael pulled David aside. "I have to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me first." David felt his stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. The board met yesterday, and we voted unanimously to promote you to senior partner. Peterson said that over the past few months, you've shown the kind of personal stability and maturity they want in a senior leader." David stared at his friend in shock. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Peterson specifically mentioned how impressed he's been with Grace and how good she is for you and Sophie. He said you seem happier, more balanced, and more focused than you've ever been." As Michael walked away, David looked across the room at Grace, who was helping Sophie fix a ribbon that had come loose on her dress. His heart felt so full he thought it might burst. "Daddy." Sophie ran over to him. "Grace taught me a new dance. Want to see?" "I'd love to see it, Princess." Sophie performed an elaborate series of twirls and jumps that had clearly been choreographed by a 7-year-old imagination. Grace applauded enthusiastically, and David found himself laughing harder than he had in years. "That was amazing, sweetheart," he said, scooping Sophie up in his arms. "Grace said we should have dance parties at home every Friday night. Can we, Daddy? Please?" David looked at Grace over Sophie's head. "What do you think, Grace? Are you up for Friday night dance parties with us?" Grace's eyes sparkled with tears of happiness. "I think that sounds like the perfect tradition for our family." Sophie squealed with delight. "Did you hear that, Daddy?" Grace said, "Our family. We're a real family now." Later that evening, after they had put Sophie to bed at David's house, Grace and David sat on his living room couch talking about the evening. "I can't believe how different tonight felt compared to that dinner with the investors," Grace said, curled up against David's side. "That's because tonight you weren't pretending to be someone else. You were just being yourself. And yourself is pretty amazing." Grace looked up at him. "David, can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I've never been happier in my entire life. 3 months ago, I was broke, lonely, and convinced that I would never have a real family. Now I have you and Sophie, and I wake up every morning feeling grateful for this beautiful life we're building together." David kissed the top of her head. Grace, you've given Sophie and me something we never thought we'd have again. You've given us hope, laughter, and love. You've shown Sophie what it looks like when someone chooses to stay, not because they have to, but because they want to. I'll always choose to stay, Grace said softly. This is where I belong. 6 months later, David stood in his backyard watching Grace and Sophie plant flowers in the garden they had decided to start together. Sophie was chattering away about which colors would look prettiest next to the fence, while Grace listened patiently and offered suggestions. The small velvet box in David's pocket felt heavy, but not with anxiety. Tonight, after Sophie went to bed, he was going to ask Grace to marry him. Not because he needed to prove anything to his board or his investors, but because he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else. Sophie looked up from the flower bed and waved at him. Daddy, come help us. Grace says we need someone tall to plant the sunflowers in the back row. David walked over and knelt down beside them in the dirt, not caring that he was getting his work clothes dirty. This was his real life now. Not the perfectly curated image he had tried to maintain for so many years, but the messy, beautiful, authentic life he had built with the woman he loved, and the daughter who completed their family. What kind of sunflowers should we plant, Princess? He asked Sophie. The biggest, brightest ones we can find, Sophie said.